very warm welcome to everyone. I am Shrija Agrawal, and you are watching the second dispatch of our series, Future of Financial Planning for Women, a Paradigm Shift. We have a pretty meaningful panel here with some of the very successful women taking the lead here in our conversation today. It's important to do some context setting here. For far too long, a woman's role was defined by the relationships she shared with the men in her life. However, over the last 20 to 30 years, we have seen an encouraging shift away from this chauvinistic paradigm. As the barriers of discrimination are being torn down, we are witnessing women rising to the top of their chosen fields, including traditionally male dominated bastions such as science, business, politics, and of course, finance. But when it comes to the ground reality, financial independence among women is still miles from where it needs to be. Today, only 64% of women globally have access to an account in a financial institution compared to about 71% of men. In India, the reality is that nearly half of all women who do possess bank accounts only use it in a limited manner or not at all. So their financial progress is missing a key element: engagement. And this reality holds true for all women, from those in the agricultural hinterland to the homes of wealthy family offices. In today's discussion, we mean to unravel the various aspects in our conversation around financial well being for women. Please help me welcome three very successful women who are really at the forefront of what they do and extremely revered in whatever they have chosen to be. Please help me welcome Preeti Rati Gupta, the founder of Lakshmi, India's first financial planning app, catering specifically to women that helps them invest independently. I also have with me Amira Shah, promoter and managing director of Metropolis Healthcare. I also have with me Radhika Gupta, who is the chief executive officer of Edelweiss Asset Management Limited. Thank you, ladies, for sort of really putting your time, energy, and commitment to this. And it's such a relief for me that I don't have to use the word gentleman and lady for the first time in my conversation today. It's such a respite for me, I can't begin to explain to you. I think my first sort of question, and just to sort of taking it further from what the context setting really was, that we are definitely in unprecedented times. The corona has really been called the blackest of the black swan. This is a time where so much of introspection thinking is happening on various counts. We really have been jolted out of our black swan blindness. I want to understand this pandemic's hammer blow on the economic condition of most Indian households has sparked tremendous awareness about the importance of investing and saving. This responsibility, however, has been relegated to the so-called men of the house. Reasons include, of course, stereotypes around women not being financially savvy, investment products being tailored mainly for men, and barriers to mobility faced by women limiting their ability to interact with financial advisors. However, the pandemic is proving to be a game changer. Many women, after seeing the tough financial economic situation their families have gone through in the pandemic owing to lack of financial planning, have woken up to the need for their own financial planning. The growth of digitization has broken the barrier for mobility for them. Women have seen how the stock market and mutual funds, which have performed far better than the general economy in the past few months, can help them shore up their financial positions. My open question to this panel here today is that can pandemic really prove to be the game changer, how women can really come at the forefront in the conversation about financial savings and planning for their families, and perhaps really come and take lead in those decision making? I can begin with you, Preeti, and get on to Amira, and then of course get Radhika's view on this.
So absolutely, first of all, it's great to be in this panel. And Shrija, you rightly said, right? It's not a panel; it's actually a panel with, two other exciting women on board. Um, so you're absolutely right, and I think we discussed this earlier as well, where you know, like I said, the pandemic was, gender blind. It affected men and women both, but I think the outcome of the pandemic actually affected women far more. So whether it was job cuts, salary cuts, all of that, and also because women especially held roles or within the workforce held roles uh, that actually faced the massive brunt of the pandemic. So whether it's tourism, aviation, all of that, right? Hospitality. This time around, as compared to all other crisis situations earlier, is one the whole rise of the digital world, access to information, rise of, I think the she economy was already on the rise. So there is no stopping women who are actually out there, who've gained great education, are part of the workforce. The avenues to earn, several avenues to really increase earnings, the rise of the gig economy, freelancing work, work from home. I think these are great opportunities, and we will see women, hopefully the number of women in workforce increase. And also the need, I think the realization that anything can happen anytime, and therefore, really the definition of a financial life, I think, will be far more important going forward. And I think most women today have realized that if you've not planned your finances, if you're suddenly faced with a situation where you don't know how to kind of manage your money or manage your finances, life can get really, really difficult. So, I mean, from our end, at least, Lakshmi, we've seen a massive rise in the number of women actually seeking that awareness, seeking more education on, how to create even things like emergency fund. How do I ensure that, I don't have to worry no matter what happens for the next 6-8 months of my, my living expenses, etc. As well as looking at long-term, money planning, which is very interesting. So I think in some ways, COVID has been that catalyst or the accelerator of women starting to think about money and actually taking that onus of saying, yes, I will learn.
Thank you, Preeti, for that insight. I come to you now, Meera. We just heard from Preeti, and she said, and she began the conversation really saying that the brunt on women on the pandemic on various accounts was much higher compared to men. And on their platform, they really seen that women, sort of opting for both short-term and longer-term financial planning measures. I want to understand from you, as a woman entrepreneur, do you think that this entire conversation around, better financial planning or an emergency fund when you run a business has also become more mainstream and also perhaps occurred to you in your trajectory? Of course, you run a much larger organization compared to, a family saving account, but do you think perhaps time has come for some of these conversations?
Look, I mean, I think time has definitely come. It's been there for a while, but personally, I'm not seeing that big change in the mindset yet. COVID, like Preeti rightly said, has had a large impact on women. And in a way where now, when women used to step out and they had maids and nannies at home to do the work, now they don't have that because they were not allowing part-time staff to come in, and therefore that entire work, or that whole entire home management fell on the women. And unfortunately, men did not play their entire part in it. I think a lot of men became a little bit more involved, but they never see it as their responsibility, right? It becomes the woman's responsibility, and therefore a lot of women actually have lost their jobs or have left their jobs on their own because they have to now manage the home. A simple example: if I look at our own attrition over the last 6 months. And I break it down gender-wise, there have been more women that have left than men. And this is a very scary trajectory. We were actually going in the other direction. And I feel COVID has actually set us back from that perspective. Talking about financial independence growing up, I remember my parents, teaching me two very different lessons. My father always told me that, look, I don't care what you do. You become a barber, you become a sweeper, you decide what your career is going to be. You don't have to be a doctor, an engineer, or whatever, but you better be the best at whatever you do. And that was the message that I always got from my father. You want to be a barber, you be the best barber. From my mother, I always got the message that, look, I don't care what you do, but you better be financially independent. And she used to keep giving me this story, and we used to keep laughing at her. And she used to always say, if you want to buy a sari, you should not have to go and ask your husband. You should be able to buy a sari on your own. And that always sort of stuck with me and my sister, that, we need to be able to do things on our own. But one thing is to hear the stories from our parents, which I'm sure a lot of us do. But the second is whether your parents actually enable you to then do it. What I mean by that is, I remember at the age of 13, my father took me to the bank below our building. He helped me open a checking and savings account. And whatever my pocket money was, I used to go and deposit my 500 rupees per month in my bank. And then I used to go and write checks, and I used to go and withdraw. And I used to feel very independent and very smart because, at the age of 13, I was going and operating a bank account. But that's when I learned how to balance my own book, right? So the question is, what is it that parents really do at home? And often I've seen that fathers are all too happy to manage their daughters' finances. not only at the age of 15, but at the age of 20, 25, 30, 40, 50, 60. And then when the father passes away, point hands over to the husband. And the women, as much as we talk about, oh, I want to earn and I want to be a working woman, the question is, after earning your income, are you learning how to manage it? Are you knowing what to do with it? Do you know how to put in savings, how to diversify, what investments to invest in? Are you part of the big financial decisions at home? Which house to buy? Often I've seen women, even when the husband will ask them, what do you think, we're thinking of buying this house. Even if they don't ask the question, the women will say, नहीं आप जानते हो, आप decision कर लो, मैं खाली color choose करूंगी wall पे, I'll do this, I'll decorate it. So women themselves push themselves out of the important decisions at home, which I think the mindset change has to first come from us. Only then the world will react to us differently. And I think what we can do for ourselves is, even today, I see a lot of women not wanting to change that mindset. So I think the more we can create this awareness of how to be, because most women think is very complicated for whatever reason. They think managing money is a very complicated situation. And I think if we can make it very simple, and people can learn to do this for themselves, I think more than anything, they set a great example for their children, especially their daughters.
Thanks, Amira. Thanks for that insight. I come to you now, Radhika. We just heard from Amira, and she sort of set the example of her own organization, saying that the attrition in women has been far higher than men, according for various societal reasons. I want to understand from you that you're running a large, mutual fund house in India. Do you think that the conversations with women around, being more financially savvy, be it around savings, be it about investment, has perhaps increased during the pandemic? What is your sense?
So I think the conversations around being financially savvy, whether you're a man or woman, have definitely increased around the pandemic, because I always think it takes a correction for people to talk about being financially savvy. When you have a bull market, everyone's money is doing well, your incomes are good, your bonuses are good, and I'm in one of the most volatile sectors in the Indian economy. What happens is, when you get a period like COVID, you realize what poor financial planning leads to. Preeti talked about this. It means I might have to move the school my children are in, and I've actually seen first-hand cases of poor financial planning where people have to change the quality of their lifestyle, the apartment they're living in, the school their kids are going to. And this is real stuff. It's not money in a bank account, right? And it's affecting the lifestyle. So I think, one, financial awareness, things like having a contingency fund. You learn all your financial lessons in a crisis. You don't learn them in good times. So I think that's one thing. Women, I think, as far as this period are, this poses two very interesting opportunities for women, right? On one hand, I think women, and we hear this in our own organization, are taking much more of the brunt of housework. On average Teams calls, you see women struggling to manage, and many of us have help, but many people are not fortunate to have help. I had a senior employee whose in-laws live with her, and the in-laws expect that because the woman's at home and she's working 8 hours a day from home, she's also going to serve them tea, right? And then the in-laws had COVID, and she was still managing the housework as a chief operating officer and managing a 1-year-old. So this is something that you see. Yet on the other hand, I think financial independence has become easier for women because work from home is suddenly a lot more acceptable, right? Even the most traditional family businesses now are accepting of work from home. I think women are now realizing post-COVID that being financially savvy is something that they can do and they have to do. And I think it's for three reasons. One is, as Preeti said, digital has made it a lot more accessible to get knowledge. Finance has always been perceived to be complicated, but I think the digital medium has made it easy to access knowledge and easy to access good quality advice. Second, you have a lot more time. We're all sitting at home to actually get involved in financial planning. And thirdly, and I hate to say this, life is uncertain. The pandemic has taught you that life is uncertain. I mean, again, I know firsthand stories of more and more women who are sitting down with their spouses to say, at least tell me the financial situation of the family. What if something happens to one of us? The pandemic has led to more mental health issues, more divorces, lots of stuff. Life is uncertain. So that is the primary reason. And I think the last thing is, Shrija, in the context of all this, it's important, and Preeti and I represent consumer financial services brands, for brands to now realize that we should make finance more accessible to the women consumer so that they don't perceive it as complicated, and we respect the right of the women consumer to take decisions. that is an opportunity for a brand like us out of the pandemic.
Thanks, Radhika. Thank you for that. I think the sort of the overarching takeaway coming from all three of you really has been that how do you simplify, this entire perceived sort of notion that finance is complicated for women at large. And like Radhika also has pointed out that this can be perhaps a golden opportunity for consumer-facing investment companies like hers and what, of course, Preeti is representing. And I think Amira also very clearly pointed this out that there is this larger conception that finance is very complicated, and the larger and the most important financial decisions, for instance, in buying a house, is relegated to the man, whereas women voluntarily takes up this choice and opportunity that I will just decorate or perhaps look at the color. So do you think that with the digitization wave, because I think the two most overused words in this entire pandemic really has been digital transformation. And I think these words had absolutely no meaning 9 months back, but have really become the center of everything that we do. So do you think this sweeping wave digitization can really, really get women and sort of turbocharge them in the financial planning? And how are you plugging that gap then, Preeti?
So Shrija, I think while digitization is, of course, the most spoken word right now, and it does become an enabler, but just to set the context right, we're saying that as a country, the penetration of financial products, or really the population that is really taking up financial planning, irrespective of men and women itself, is very, very low. I think what I feel extremely optimistic about is today half the country. So you have like almost like 60%. So you have about 600 million people using smartphones, using data very actively. And women are the higher percentage of this data user in India. So if you look at least all the social media channels, you will see women are actively participating. This, newfound kind of feeling of liberation that, okay, you're connected to the world as well as to everybody within your, ecosystem. To me, that is, I think, an indication of really, that tipping point where we will see women actually take up that opportunity far more aggressively than even men will. What, of course, like you rightly asked, that, platforms like people like us, for example, Lakshmi was really launched just to, kind of close that gap, right? Because, I mean, the numbers were horrific when we looked at it. When you look at, less than 12% of women in the country really investing their money. And if you look at just working women, it's even poorer, that number. We recently did a survey of about 1,250 women across the country, single and married. And it's disheartening to see that even within single working women, just about 35% of women really actively take their financial decisions. And like Amira said, the rest of them mostly are like, my dad will see, look up, help me with it. And some of them just kind of, it's just the bank, and sometimes it's not even saving on their mind. So it's kind of really, disturbing to see those numbers. And I think from really starting point, really being single, where you have control over your finances and what you're doing, to really going forward as married and married with children, the numbers only get worse. So, if you look at women who are married and who have children, there's a mere 20% women who are actually taking financial decisions. Whereas if you look within the household, and all of us, right, Amira said, and all of us learned that financial independence is taught to us. Saving money is what mothers have always taught us, right? So when, you'll see large part of households where mothers are really the role models when it comes to saving money. But when it comes to taking money decisions, majority of households, it's the role model is the father or the male. Similarly, dining table conversations are more about, asking the son that how are you going to earn your money and how are you going to grow your money. Whereas that's not typically, and typical households, that's not the conversations that I had with the daughter. And I think given this, the entire, access to now so much of information, our role as a platform in really, uncomplicating it, simplifying it, making it very relatable. I mean, let's also understand financial services, I think, and maybe Radhika can back me up on this. We have, I think, less than 14% of, in terms of gender diversity, there are less than 14% women in financial services. So therefore, you don't expect that tonality. You don't expect the conversations also, from a male-dominated, a very largely male-dominated industry to talk to women. So I think that is the starting point. And while we struggle for diversity there, which, by the way, in this pandemic has gone even worse. But I think at least platforms like Lakshmi, women who are there within financial services like Radhika, I think our conversations and our communication that goes out to the world. For example, if you look at all the advertisements in financial services, they are again very male centric. They're talking to men. Very few women are shown in any advertising or communication, except for insurance, where also fear is used for the woman, saying that, okay, what if something happens to your spouse or your father, and then what happens? So take insurance, right? I think that communication needs to change. Interestingly, Amphy has been doing a little bit of that. That change is coming in, but there's so much more that needs to be, kind of spoken about, and that wall of inhibition, intimidation of, numbers are difficult, financial planning is complicated. All of that needs to really go, needs to be really brought down, broken down. And that can only happen by a lot more conversation, communication, example setting. One of the things that I've realized in my experience in Lakshmi is that a peer-to-peer conversation within women is a very, very strong motivator for women to take up money management, as opposed to really financial advisors speaking to them. Which is why Lakshmi also, we formed the core of Lakshmi is a community of women. And there are women from, women who have done their financial planning to women who want to learn. And there's just so much of communication on that platform, on that community. There's so much conversation, letting down inhibitions, because you're on a platform where you're not being judged. There are no smart men around who are judging you and saying, okay, you don't know this. And how can, this is a very silly question to ask. So we do realize that that is a huge enabler. And therefore, I think women themselves play a very, very huge role, whether it is within the industry or outside the industry. I think as mentors, enablers, having these conversations. And most importantly, I think it is so, so critical. I think all of us today here are we are far more privileged. But look at, the mass affluent women who are just starting their careers in the age group of, maybe 23 onwards to 30, where access to a financial advisor is difficult, and also wanting to reach out is intimidating. That's really that section of women that all of us need to talk to, because remember, that the earlier you begin, the richer you get, right? And it's amazing how that awareness of saying, okay, you can begin even with 1,000 rupees, you can begin your investing journey is not there.
Okay. Thanks, Preeti. Thanks for this. And I come to you now, Radhika. I want to understand, I think she sort of raised several important points, and she said that the communication coming from the financial services industry is just so male-centric. And sort of that marvels me that, in a country 1.3 billion people, you're talking about almost half of the population, really women. And then you are somebody who is, the financial engineering of the products. Those are gender neutral. But why aren't we just simply not looking at women? The women mass folk, really. I mean, what is missing there? I mean, isn't that such an important component of retail investor base out there, just from sheer business sense?
So I'll talk a little bit about the problem, but I also want to talk about the solution. Right? So I'll talk about the historical reasons for the problem. The historical reason for the problem is that when you have an industry, and I have been a broken record about the state of women in financial services, and just because we had 6 banking CEOs, because KV Kamath happened to be a legend, doesn't mean women in financial services have made progress in this country. We're in terrible shape. I mean, I again am a broken record of 200 leadership positions in the asset management industry. Less than 5 are held by women. So how do you expect anyone to take designing of financial products for women seriously, or designing of financial communication. Because if the people designing communication in a conference room are all men, chances are, by the way, I mean, Preeti alluded to Amphi. There's one woman on the Amphi board, which is me. I think the marketing committee of Amphi probably doesn't have a single woman or maybe one woman in representation. So if you don't have enough people, if you don't have enough women financial advisors, you're not going to be focused on designing communication for women. I do take your point, Shrija, that there are no financial products for women. A good financial product is a good financial product for men or for women. What the communication needs to do is two to three things in terms of solutions. One, it needs to be far more simplified. We produce fund after fund, fund after fund. I mean, mutual fund companies are notorious for doing NFO after NFO. We don't talk about how to use, how a woman can take these thousands of funds and mutual fund schemes that we have in this country and actually use them for our purpose. What fund can I use if I want to park money for 3 months? What fund can I use if I want to park money for 6 months with no risk? In very simple terminology, all the stuff that is out there, how can a woman use it in her financial planning journey? What will go right and what will go wrong? We're trying to do some of this in terms of simplification, launching less and just focusing more on how you can use the existing thing. The second thing I think that we can do in terms of communication is the, and you know, you represent the media industry also, is the kind of role modeling that we have. Unfortunately, financial services has been perceived because of movies like Wolf of Wall Street and the whole Dalal Street culture and Scam 92 and all that great stuff to be a very alpha male, glamorous, there are girls around the guys, all kinds of nonsense, when money management is actually a very responsible industry and you don't need to be sitting in front of 6 Bloomberg screens to be a good money manager. I don't think there is one conversation about a strong investment role model that is a woman. You hear about Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger and XYZ, but there's an equally successful woman called Anne Schieber who started as an IRS professional and was just a great personal money manager and left $20 million to charity. I mean, how many people talk about Anne Schieber? So you also have to make women realize in your communication that this profession is not rocket science. Managing money is just about being goal oriented, taking sensible risks, and having discipline. And all these three things, I think women have more than adequate qualities for. So I think that's important. And the third thing is, and I've done probably hundreds of chats with individual women across the socioeconomic spectrum, people like Lakshmi who are creating safe forums for women to have conversations. Because sometimes in these forums, and you know, the women oriented forums I do are the best ones, the questions are very basic, like how do I ask my husband if I want to get involved in money? You know, can I take money back from a mutual fund? And you feel very conscious of asking these questions in a mixed audience sometimes. Hate to say that, but that's the reality. So providing a safe haven for women to ask questions is also very important.
Thank you, Radhika. That's sort of very well said. I come to you now, Amira. Amira, you heard from both the practitioners here, you know, who are running these companies, you know, in the financial services industry. If you were to give an outside-in perspective to both Preeti and Radhika, what would that really be?
I mean, I can tell you that in other industries, financial services is seen as the beacon of women being involved in diversity. You know, let's not lose hope yet. You know, as you know, in healthcare and other industries, which are far more traditional in mindset. You know, if you also go back into history and look at why financial services, like Radhika was saying, besides the fact that you had one or two people, you know, who decided to create more diversity in one or two banks, you've also had a lot of MNC involvement in India for a long time. And what happens with multinational corporations is they bring in their own best practices. And therefore, they're able to gear talent up. In other industries where you have not seen MNC involvement over the last 20 years, it's very indigenous in nature. You're not seeing that diversity build up yet and that talent creation happening, male or female, frankly. So I think, you know, I think financial services, and typically what happens is the few women who have been successful get highlighted so much because there are such few of us anyway, then everybody starts to believe that's the norm of an industry. When as reality is in maybe only 5, 6, 10 people, you know, gracing the same magazine covers every year. But then it gives an impression that the whole industry is extremely diverse, which is not necessarily the case. But I think what I do see as progress in India, I see at least in the metro cities or in tier two towns, women are definitely becoming more aware of the fact that they don't need to be only stuck to one image or definition of what their family or ecosystem or society decides they must be, and they are feeling more comfortable in designing that image for themselves. I think that's one very good thing that's happening. I think the second good thing that's happening is that definitely financial awareness has increased over time. And therefore, you are seeing women get more involved, even if they're not now still the single decision maker or even an equal joint decision maker. Number three, I think the millennial generation, even if their parents have been more traditional and more sort of ready to follow the normal rule book, which our generation, frankly, was still in between. I don't think we were too rebellious in nature, but I think the millennial generation is a very different thought process. They want to know why for everything, and they want to question, why for everything, and they're not willing to take anything blindly and just follow a rule book, which I think is fantastic. And these are the things that will actually bring about, the changes in time to come. In healthcare, I have almost 45% of my total 5,000 employees are women. Unfortunately, if I look at the leadership teams and if I look at the second level and the third level, you don't see that representation of women. So I think, again, one thing is to look at the data in terms of volumes, but the second to talk about is really whether they are constituting decision making in those things. And while we keep talking about how much women need to change, the reality is we don't exist in this universe alone. And women can only change as much as the opposite gender, the men change as well. And I think too much of our conversations are to women, by women, and I think actually we need to be having much more of those conversations with men, because they are going to play a very important role in the bringing up of the next generation or in the changing of the existing generation as well.
Thanks, Ameera. Preeti, you wanted to respond to that, what Ameera just mentioned, that perhaps the conversation should be more, aimed at men and involving them equally, because perhaps change can only happen then, and not just talking to women more and more. And I really want to understand from you, and I was on a panel at, Women in Finance, and I think I heard from a bunch of very successful women, and they all said that, Shrija, self-doubt is very big. We ourselves get into this chain of self-doubt so often that it's not even funny. And it's coming from women entrepreneurs who are managing like pretty huge sums of money, especially in the financial services industry. So how does that chain of self-doubt really breaking when you are peering through these peer-to-peer conversations of women? What are the observations and inference that you can draw, one can learn from?
So, Shrija, just to your first point, I think it's very interesting because at Lakshmi, I know that we are talking to three different generations of women. The Gen Z is completely blasé, right? They don't really. It is not about me being a woman or a man, or that's not really what's in their mind. It's essentially saying money is an enabler, and I need to. This is something it's a skill that I need to have, and it's a skill that I will develop, because also the way they think is very application based, right? It's not theoretical, etc., because of the education, because of the environment, all of that. Interestingly about the millennials, right, which Ameera also touched upon, was so we had a post in Lakshmi, we on a social media, which said a man is not a financial plan, and believe me, I think we had far more men who were excited about that post. And that's how the millennials think, right? Where the men are saying, look, I don't want to take all that responsibility of money, right? Why don't you become an equal partner? Why don't you share the load here? If you want me to share the load of the washing machine, let me share, you share this load as well. This is how, that generation thinks. And which is very, very interesting, because the men are very clear. So getting them into the conversation is actually quite easy in that generation, because they want women to take on that responsibility. They want to, and I hate saying this, that they want to encourage, because at some point, it comes across as very patronizing, but they are very clear that it's important for the woman to take on that, one, to understand and also share that responsibility. I think it's with the women where we kind of struggle, where there is that intimidation, and I think that's where the community simplifying breaking that myth that managing money is complicated. You don't, like Radhika said, it's not. Also, that whole piece about, managing your money or investing your money essentially means, just going and, the image in your head is really the stock markets and the bull and the bear, really. And breaking all of those to say that financial planning is actually, just a few simple pillars, and it's based on that, and decisions, just these 3-4 decisions, and you are done, right? Investing is a very, very simple step to take. You can begin, you can be the most simplest of investors too. You can go on to understanding and doing algo and all of that, right? But it's not necessary to be there. You don't begin there. It's very, very simple to start. And that's where I think communication, yes, very important. And that's where I think your question of self-doubt really is very, very pertinent, where the women really hesitate in taking that step. And that's surprising because, and I say this always, that our education institutes, whether it's our schools, whether it's our, higher education, technical education, none of them really teach you. Even the ones that teach you finance and accounting do not teach you how to manage your money, right? Do not teach you that. They teach you how to earn your money. Maybe, you get great campus placements, etc. But nobody talks about, okay, once you started earning your money, what are you going to do? And I think that's such an important life skill. And it's a life skill that men and women need to learn equally. And I think that's where, the foundation probably is laid. I think what we are doing at Lakshmi is what a lot of that should have happened in your early school, in your schooling years, your teenage years, and then your post-grad education, etc. I think that, to my mind, is something that anyways we as women, I think we face everywhere. It's just not money, right? Whether it's our careers, whether you step out into the real world, you step out, the orientation or that, that voice in your head is always of self-doubt. And I just feel that this is something that, a lot of us talking about it, a lot of us, really sharing these platforms, etc., does go a long way. But I think a big role is played really by homes, families, education institutes, etc., which tell you that, if you could be a great engineer, why can you not be a good investor? It's as simple as that.
Yeah, thanks for that, Preeti. I think we have spoken quite a bit here today. We've had a very interesting conversation till now. We spoke about the financial engineering of products. We spoke about the pandemic as a real opportunity as for turbocharging financial planning for women. We spoke about how the communication needs to change. We spoke about the power of community building as a strong platform for women to come out and speak for themselves, especially in financial well-being. I want to understand from each one of you, and I can begin with you, perhaps Radhika, then get on to Ameera. How have you broken the wall of intimidation for yourself? You have had a successful career, all three of you. And I wanted to quote an HBR article here, and just for a very simple thing, we talk so much about women entrepreneurship being so loosely bandied around. And there was an HBR piece which essentially said that when women startup founders, approach the VCs, how the questioning was so different. Investors adopted what is called a promotion orientation when quizzing male entrepreneurs, which means they focus on hopes, achievements, advancements, and ideals. Conversely, when questioning female entrepreneurs, they embraced a prevention orientation, which is concerned with safety, responsibility, security, and vigilance. So my question to this panel is that, VCs represent like the cream de la cream, 1% of the world's best in class education. When they have this kind of mindset towards women's entrepreneur and just explicitly saying that, why don't you have perhaps a male co-founder or a male partner? How do you really go about? I mean, that is the top end of the pyramid. And then you get down to the financial well-being and planning for the women at large. I can begin with you, Radhika. You can perhaps share some insights there, then get on to you, Ameera. And my last round of questioning will really, from all these three fantastic women, would be about solutions and where do we go from here? Yeah, Radhika.
So I think any woman who probably is talking on this forum or any forum has some story to tell about self-doubt, discrimination, feeling alone in a room. I remember when we had just started Forefront Capital, and actually then I had moved back from the US to India, never lived in India, so I was extremely awkward, and I was 24. And three of us partners, and the other two were men. We had gone to meet one of these Dalal Street kind of brokers. It was my father-in-law's friend or something, just to learn how the stuff works. And I was wearing trousers and a shirt and whatever. So this broker, he reaches out and he shakes the hand of my two other founders. And then I put out my hand to shake his hand, and he's like, Namaste ji. And for me, because I was, and there's nothing wrong about it, right? It's probably how he was culturally brought up. I mean, it was weird for him to see me that way. And then again, when I joined the mutual fund community, because there are no other female CEOs, I had this phase of like, where am I and why am I here? I've learned a few ways to get over it. One is that I don't think women ask enough for opportunities, and I think society teaches you to set really low aspirations in life. So I have learned to ask for opportunities. I have learned to negotiate my salaries. I've learned that if I want a promotion, I better ask for it because my career is my responsibility and no one is going to do it. And it's unfortunately not a free world where you're going to sit there and someone will say, oh, Radhika is really nice. You know, we should really think about giving her some opportunities. I've just learned that I have to put my hand up. And this is the one thing that I tell all women founders, young professionals, is just go ask, because it is data that women don't go out and ask. So please ask. The second thing is I have learned, and I think, you know, Preeti talked about self-doubt. We are also taught in India that we have to be perfect and that we won't fail and we won't have weaknesses. I've learned to take that burden off my head and share stories of failure and weakness. And I found it to be very empowering for myself. And I get hundreds of letters every month from young women across the country and beyond India about how hearing someone's story of self doubt and then eventual success, because most people figure it out, you know, perhaps lifts them and gives them another chance. So I've learned that, you know, you don't try to, India teaches you that mehnat karo aur fir settle ho jao. But what if you do work and you fail? I mean, it's okay, right? It happens. So I've learned that that's important. And the third thing I've learned is you have to look at the brighter side of being a woman. Everyone always asks in these panels, what are the challenges you faced? What are the challenges? Yeah, there have been challenges, but there are also tons of advantages. And if you look at your gender as an advantage, I promise you the world will look at it as an advantage. I think I get a ton of attention in my industry because I'm the only woman. I'm being really honest. I've got the opportunity to meet and interview so many fantastic women around the world and across the country because I'm a woman. And you have to look at the brighter side and carry yourself that way.
Amira, you want to add to that?
Yeah, look, I think people treat you the way you sort of see yourself, and if you approach life, defensive or not sure or underconfident, then people will treat you the same way. A little bit of what Radhika was saying. I know so many times, the description, for example, simple thing. You take Sanjeev Bajaj, you take any person who's come up in a family business, right? Nowhere it is ever written Rahul Bajaj's son, Sanjeev Bajaj, built this business. Never happens, right? They just say Sanjeev Bajaj built this business. But for example, if you see the way they describe women, it's always, oh, she took her father's business here, she did this, she did that. No, you take my case itself, right? The business was worth, 18 crores in 2001. Today, I've taken it to be 10,500 crores. I believe I built the business. I don't see it as a family business. I don't see it as somebody else's business that I've managed or I've helped with. So a lot of it is about not allowing people outside's perspectives to shape our own. And it's about us shaping our own perspectives and building our own confidence in what we believe that we have done. And I think the conversation around us may not always be aware. Sometimes it may be ignorant. Sometimes it may be out of naivety. It's just that people just don't know. And that's also okay. And not to take it too personally and not to make it into a personal hurt or a personal insult or to be overly sensitive to it. Like Radhika said, we just have to wear our own confidence. We have to get about life, do our own thing, and hopefully not allow the world and society around us allow the influences to come in, but not allow it to become spears in our heart. And neither do we want to allow the walls to be built up so thick that we are inaccessible. There's lovely things about being a woman, and if we can embrace the fact that we are emotionally smarter, the fact that we are more intuitive, the fact that we can use all of this productively to help ourselves in our own professions and our own life, then that's good for us. There's no reason why we should be defensive or ashamed or embarrassed of our emotions at all.
Preeti, you want to add to that? You heard both these women, their experiences.
Yeah, I mean, I totally, it feels so good to hear both of them. And I think we should, probably have, always women around us sharing this and talking about this. And I think, like everybody, I've had my experience as well. Uh, Especially when I started the commodity futures desk. I mean, it was crazy, right? Going to these mandis where men thought you were like from another planet. Like, what are you doing in a place like this where and I had to talk to them to come on from the unorganized to the organized platforms. And it was, yeah, I think my first 2-3 visits, which was just like Radhika, they just like kind of looked through me and wanted to speak to my male colleagues. And I said, boss, this glass ceiling, I'm not breaking, I'm shattering. That was something that I decided back then. And you do, I think that benefit of really being a woman, where after 2 years, people were like, okay, oh, you're that woman from Anand Rathi. I'm like, okay, that's the identity, right? But I think that benefit of really being a woman are far more, and I think that's what um, I've also always focused on and said, okay, what do I bring to the table? I think and especially now, because I talk to so many women and tell them why money management and why as a woman you are better equipped to manage money. Radhika highlighted how we're conservative. We are actually not conservative. I actually say we are not risk averse. We are risk aware. We weigh our decisions, especially when it comes to money. Even more, we weigh our decisions. We make we kind of get information and then we decide where to put in our money. We are disciplined. We are goal oriented. Most importantly, I think in situations which are like crisis situations, I think the ability to stay calm and say, okay, I'm going to get through this with a level-headed mind is again an attribute that we as women have. So actually, as investors, actually as financial managers, we are far better equipped. It's only a self-recognition. I think Warren Buffett has said, invest like a woman. I think nobody really took it seriously. We stopped at that, where women didn't really take that that quote and said, okay, invest like a woman means that I am myself the best investor, really. And yeah, I think I think a lot has been spoken about. I mean, it's been a conversation that we've been having for the longest time, right? Women and glass ceilings and self-doubt and all of that. I think our conversation really needs to tilt towards saying that why as women we are equipped to do a lot of things. And this is really not even about competitiveness, right? It's not men versus women. It's women, men and women, because you actually want a healthy world right around us. You want that equality around, and that equality is healthy, which is what the conversation needs to be about. And which is why for me, Lakshmi has actually been that place where it's to drive that equality, really, because I think equality really comes from money power, and let's be very candid about it. So it's not about whether you have the democracy to say something or not. The minute you have that money power, you're standing on your own, in Radhika's words, AUM, then that, okay, I'm okay to say this, right? I have the freedom to make choices, and that's what it's all about. And I think that's something that we need to probably just veer towards now, pivot towards having those conversations, having, getting more and more women to talk about these things.
Yeah.
Sorry, if I can come in for a minute, Shrija, just on that point that Preeti made about money being an equalizing force, or becoming sort of a platform for equality. While I do agree with that partially, that look, financial independence can definitely give you a voice as well. I feel like one of the negatives about the Western world, in the more developed countries, is the mindset that unless you have money, you will not be respected. And I feel like somewhere in our culture or in our country, I feel like the equalizing platform should be about respect, and respect can be for different things in different people. So I know many couples who are our parents' age, where the woman did not earn at all. But it did not define their relationship. It did not define their equality of voice. It did not define the fact that they both had respect for each other in the relationship and involved each other in the key decisions of life. And I think somewhere while money can be an enabler, I think it's very important that we not go to the other extreme, which I feel some of the parts of the world have gone to, where that becomes the only equalizer in a relationship. It can be one of the many, but definitely not, in my mind at least, the primary, because then the relationship, especially between a couple, can become very transactional. That I earn so much, so I have so much say. I earn so much, so I have this much say. If we can learn to respect each other's values, opinion, culture, beyond the money we are bringing to the table, I feel like that would be maybe relationships more evolved, hopefully in the future.
Okay, that's a personal perspective, and thanks, Ameera, for sharing that perhaps money should not be the core equalizing, component with a relationship between a man and a woman. I think the last round of questioning, and I think this entire conversation that we've had till now, and some very interesting points came to the fore: personal experiences, how to break this wall of intimidation, the self-doubt conversation, digitization way. There's some very interesting macro factors at play here. First of all, this is 2020. Sustainable development goals for India are at priority. This entire conversation around ESG, I have never seen this, becoming as louder as ever before. I have seen this wave around energy way back around 4 to 5 years back. A lot of PEVC came around just with the sheer fact that let's do something called greenwashing, that even if something is not green, you just label it as green and you could raise money. I just hope something doesn't play out for the ESG also, something called the ESG washing. But I do think that some sincere and very earnest effort is being taken in this regard. So we have this huge digitization wave where from tier 2 to tier 3 cities, people are trying to understand that digital is really so important. We have ESG at play. And of course, we have this realization coming from the pandemic that, financial savings and, thinking about emergency is very mainstream now. So keeping that as the context or the background, I'll begin with you, Radhika, and then go on the panel. If you were to give me your 3 concluding trends or solutions or the way forward of relationship between women and money, how will that be carried forward? What do you think?
Just a sec. 3 trends, and I'll add, 2 lines on ESG as well. I think ESG is important, and I have been quoting this in the asset management industry. I think Indian mutual funds have suddenly discovered that everybody needs to launch an ESG fund because we realize that ESG contributes to the bottom line. Apparently, ESG produces better returns globally. 2 parts to that. I find that very encouraging in a way because unfortunately, we are corporates, right? And we don't do things until there is a bottom line impact. I always believe that if gender diversity, people realize the bottom line impact of that, then corporates will. If you realize that more diversity contributes to better profits, to better ROEs, then you will actually be very serious about it. For my industry, if we believe that ESG funds are the way, then perhaps we can start by doing something about our own diversity statistics because diversity is an important part of ESG. I think the 3 things for the future. One, as I said, not launching more products for women, but having conversations with the women consumer about why she needs to invest and how she can use the existing tools to invest. And also treating the woman consumer and respecting her right to make a choice. So 3 years I saw this ad from a financial brand saying, mother, wife, sister, investor. I mean, is she something beyond mother, wife, sister, investor? Nobody writes ads, father, husband, son, investor. So respect the woman's right to make a choice. I think that's the second very, very important thing. And keep having more conversations on why women need to do this. The millennial generation is super aspirational. So let's use that generation to change things. Incidentally, we are having this conversation today is International Men's Day. And I would end by saying that you should have men as part of the conversation. In fact, in my office, the men today are complaining that when it's Women's Day, there are all these activities, etc. And, Men's Day is not trending on Twitter. It's not about men versus women. It's about the majority versus the minority. I bet if there were 10 women in a room and one guy, that one guy would probably feel very, very out of place. So keep men in the conversation. On our Women's Day campaign this year, we actually did an ad about men. We actually did an ad saying that if anything positive has to happen with women, then men have to do it.
Amira, you want to add to that?
Yeah, good points, Radhika. I think the trends, I think, is going to be a lot about going back to that self doubt. How do you build your own confidence? And I've said often that, and my TED talk as well, that my actual speech was, your confidence is your biggest asset, and it's not what our traditional families taught us, which was jewelry, and then later it went on to property, etc., etc. Financial assets have their own space in life, but they cannot replace our inherent self-worth and our inherent space of confidence. And I think that is, something that we all should, as citizens of the country, citizens of the world, have a right to be able to have our own confidence. Now, whether our families have given that or our systems have given that or not, we can't spend the next 20, 30 years of our life blaming what our families did. After the age of 20, we're adults, and it's up to us now to develop our own confidence or not. And I think each woman, if we could pick up that sense of saying, look, how do I build my confidence? And at least what I've learned is that building your confidence is not an intellectual discussion. It's not a theoretical point of view. It can only happen when you actually go out and try things. And you actually go out and try, and sometimes you fail, and you get up again, and you try again. And the few times when you do that, and you are still standing, and in some cases you're successful, and in some cases you're joyful, you learn that actually I've come out on the other side. And that coming out on the other side, actually going through exactly what you're fearful of, and coming on that other side is what gives you confidence. So I think we have to go through that process, and it cannot be derived by any of us sitting on our chairs, but by actually going into the real world and just giving our best shot. So I think to me that is continues to be the most important thing that as women we can do. I think the second thing is, as few of us who've been very privileged in life to either have families or ecosystems that have encouraged us, or we found our own confidence to encourage ourselves. I think it is our ability, and I would say responsibility, to pay it forward. So whether it's what Preeti's doing with Lakshmi, whether what Radhika's doing with Amphi, whether what I'm doing with Empowerers, which is to support women entrepreneurs, and what many other women are doing in their own capacity, I think it's our duty to pay it forward to other women and see how we can get other women to move from the space of minority hopefully a bigger minority, a more significant minority in the years to come. So to me, I think that's the second very important thing. And I would say third, since I've recently had a baby boy, it's more on my mind about really how we bring up our boys. And I think that again is up to us as women on how we bring up our boys so that they're better quality husbands, better quality fathers, better quality spouses, and teammates in a working environment. And hopefully, the next generations of women don't have to have the conversations that we're having, and it is a little bit easier for them.
Okay. Preeti, you want to add to that? You heard from both Amira and Radhika.
I think both of them really highlighted, and I think I completely agree. I'll just add to that. I think, and I will kind of stick to the fact that, or I will stick to the entire piece of really where women feature in the space of money, power. And I say this because I also come from that background where I watched my grandmother really manage household finances, and we come from very, very humble beginnings, and to see her really bring up the household because she managed the money so well, taking into account goals of every person in the family, right? It was not just one person's goals that were kind of looked at. So she had 5 kids, and each one had different education aspirations. To see that those are met was, if you look back in that time, to the ability to do that, which meant even taking those small decisions. We didn't have these fancy investment instruments then, but she kind of made do with whatever little was available. That how does my money go further than what it can right now. And I think, to me, I think that remains an overriding example of how, as women, we can really, it's not just about managing money, but it is essentially our own families, because the way we look at money is family goals, investing that money back into the family, and more importantly into the community. I think you've heard all of us here, and each one of us in our capacity, our will invest back into the community, whether it is our time, effort, money, etc. And I think that is that big trend that I see going forward. Increasingly, I see, and I think Ameera can vouch for that, that there, successful women entrepreneurs are investing in other women entrepreneurs, upcoming women entrepreneurs. So that the fact that our belief in building women-led businesses or women-led it could be communities, etc., is just so strong, and I see that growing even further and further. Of course, it's a long way till we reach that entire perfect world of gender equality or gender diversity being a topic which is not really spoken about. But what I'm very, very optimistic again is, interestingly, I have within my house both. I have my daughter is a millennial and my son is a Gen Z, and I watch both of them and I see the difference in the way they think. My daughter is still, and again in millennials, I'd really like to highlight this, that the way millennials in urban areas think is vastly different to millennials in the rural areas. And I think that is something that as a country we need to recognize. There is a India millennial and there is a Bharat millennial. And I think that gap is still very, very wide. And I see, my daughter is still the urban Indian millennial, and the way she thinks about, she's very, very vocal about diversity and all of that. And for my son, it's a non-issue. He's like, why is there even an issue on equality? We are all equals, right? What's the big deal? I mean, he's the one who will come and cook. He will make sure that, if I'm unwell or anybody in the house is unwell, they're looked after. If he needs something, he will go and get it for himself. He's not waiting for anybody to help him or do anything. So the way he thinks is very different. To me, I think that actually will be the big trend, and which is why I increasingly feel also that generation thinks very, in some sense, it's very individual, right? That I will look after myself, I will look after people around me, but the people around me also need to look after themselves. Right? It's not like, okay, I am the hero of the house, or, I am the woman of the house and I have to do this, or he has to do this. And I think with that trend, I see individualism actually rise, but also in some sense of where a more peaceful space where, men are giving enough space to women, women are giving enough space to men and saying, okay, we are both, we are both in this world, and we bring to the table our own qualities, our attributes, and that's how we need to kind of make it like a perfect world. I think that's where I see it going. In terms of money, I actually do think that even now Amphi data says that while the number of women investors are far, far less, the average AUM that a woman holds is actually higher than that of men. So I actually see women get richer in the coming few years. And to me, that talks not just of money power for a woman, but actually money power for us as a society, as a community, and as a country.
Okay. I think thank you to all of you, Preeti, Ameera, and Radhika, for sharing the insights with us. And before I do wrap up, I think it's time to do a quick rapid fire with all three of you. I think it'll be an interesting one. I'll just sort of throw questions in randomly, and I'll just take names. So I think all three of you can perhaps have your mics on here. My first question to you would be, Radhika, if this world were a billboard, what would you write on that?
Be your best.
Ameera, 2030 and conversation on gender diversity.
Hopefully not existent.
Okay. Preeti, what book is Preeti Rathi Gupta reading right now?
Well, right now, actually, I read a fiction and, actually, I'm reading this book, very interesting book called The Great Game of Business, which is something that I'm very keen to implement in Lakshmi. So,
okay. Radhika, your best takeaway from this conversation today?
Takeaway. there are many, which is why I'm struggling to give an answer. My best takeaway is the one that I've always had, that men need to be part of the conversation around women.
Okay.
And I think women really believe that.
Okay. Amira, in your life, your most overwhelming experience till now as a woman entrepreneur, which you can never forget?
2015, when I decided to take personal debt of 600 crores to increase the stake in my company because I believed in what it could become, and I was backing myself.
Okay. Preeti, I wanted to understand from you that, this conversation about money and women we are at, how important is vernacular in that? And do you think that vernacular is really the future? They've just most bandied around.
Well, I do think actually for the next 10 years, it'll be very, very important. I think we are in some ways going back to our roots. And as a country, I've realized that a lot of communication needs to be vernacular because, if you're talking of something which is already intimidating, and then you kind of talk in a language which is not really the first language, it tends to be even more difficult to reach out. So vernacular is something that is here to stay at least for the next 10, 12 years, till you really have English as a language across the country, which is, or Hindi actually, which is well understood by everyone. And I think as a country, we have, I feel extremely, and I've seen that pride that people take in their language. And I think we should kind of enable that pride. I don't see any reason to say that, there is another language that you need to understand this in.
Okay. Radhika, the most overhyped
On
word.
that point, Radhika, can we have some vernacular names for all the mutual fund terminology?
Absolutely. And I did my last ad. Our current ad is actually done in Hindi and 4 regional languages, and it's Badhao Bachao in Hindi. But I love the Kannada version. It's like Badhao Bachao is like increase and take back, and it's Hechisi Ulisi, and I totally love the Kannada version. I'm like a big fan of vernacular.
Okay.
I learned all the vernacular Hindi words thanks to people like Shrija and TV channels.
Okay. Men and women working with bots. Is that
What was the question?
Men and women working with bots. Is that a reality, or you think that's too far-fetched?
Technology being really big in financial services, yes. Men and women working with Siri on a day-to-day basis, no. So I want to caution my answer because I think ultimately managing people is a human business. And in fact, I think advising money is still a human business.
Okay. And Amira, the most overhyped word that you have seen around conversation with women empowerment that you're kind of tired of answering any further?
I'm honestly very sick of this question of how do you manage work-life balance. I just hate that question. It's very, very annoying. I hope people stop asking that question. And if you're going to ask me, then please ask the men next to me as well, because they are also parents and they also have families and they also work.
That's so true. Yeah. Why don't you ask men that question? Why do you only ask us? Like, why?
Okay.
What do you get out of that answer?
Okay, my last question to all three of you. The favorite Netflix show that you guys are binge watching right now. I can start with you, Preeti.
Crown. Sorry.
Radhika?
Okay, I actually really liked Scam 92. I mean, despite everything I said, I think finally they did something good in financial services.
Amira.
It's not Netflix, it's Sony.
Yeah. Amira, what are you binge?
I watched The Social Dilemma recently, which I enjoyed, and it went into a lot of technical details on how social media is scamming everybody. So worth watching.
Okay. So thank you all of you for sharing your time, energy, and commitment to this, and really appreciate this for being so insightful and candid. I do hope our watchers, both men and women, will take away something very significant from this conversation. And I do hope that by 2030, the next decade, we don't really have panel and conversations focused on the topic financial well-being for women or men. I personally believe that both men and women need to be empowered. And that is where you have a conversation and a forum which is not only equitable, but something which is just so much seamless. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thanks, guys.
Lakshmi will make that happen.
Yeah. Okay.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks everyone. See you.